Hello, and welcome to the Safer Tomorrow podcast, your resource for reducing crime and violence and making more peaceful societies. I'm Dr. Joe, and I'm a criminal justice researcher, a community social work educator, and I am very passionate about finding strategies to reduce crime and violence for my nation, Jamaica, the Caribbean, and the wider world. Today we have with us Mr. Randy Finnikin, and it is such a pleasure. I feel so privileged that he has
Uh,
decided to participate and join with us and just share his experience. I mean, initially I was thinking I would focus on one particular area of his life, but I'm just like, he has been in so many different initiatives that I think it would be better if we broaden the scope and just allow him to speak freely about some of the initiatives that he has been involved in within his life. So, Mr. Randy Finnikin is a visionary leader, a social activist, and motivational speaker with a passion for community development and the empowerment of people, especially the lower class and the disenfranchised. He's an elder in the Open Bible Church and he serves in many capacities. Formerly of Cornerstone Ministries, where he led that organization in a number of programs, which you'll be hearing about today. He was responsible for organizing the deportee reintegration program some years ago and has represented Jamaica on delegation to Canada to study restorative justice principles. He's employed by the Jamaica Broilers Group as the executive director for Spring Village Development Foundation and Training Institute, a community based organization that has won numerous awards and recognition for its innovative and enterprising strategies. He's the chairman of Old Harbor Development Area Committee, where he served for the past 16 years, overseeing the development interests of 7 communities or 60 districts of OHDA. He's also the chairman of the Sunbeam Boys Home, convener of Citizens Action Against Crime, a 4-year-old initiative headquartered in Old Harbor that promotes citizens' proactive engagement in safety and security initiatives aimed at crime prevention, reduction, and response to criminality of all forms. Currently, he's leading the Old Harbor's Ministers Fraternal in the development, implementation, and sustainability of the church's violence prevention outreach, targeting men, families, and children, especially boys. Welcome, Mr. Finnegan.
Dr. Joe, thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure it is to be here on this podcast with you.
Thank you so much. I mean, when I'm reading your bio, I'm just like, wow, so much work has been done in your life. I mean, I'm hoping that a book will come at some point in time so that persons can really learn from what you've done. And one of the things that this podcast, and we're very, very passionate about, is encouraging civil society members to get involved. And I'm believing
Yes.
and I trust that your experience, your life, the initiatives that you've been a part of will be a demonstration of what that looks like to others so that they will know that it's possible and that they can also join and participate and join in the reduction of violence. All right. So first, before we get into the nitty gritty, how did you get into this work? Like, what sparked your interest?
It has, Dr. Joe, might I just say unto your listeners that this hasn't been my doing. It's really have been the Lord. He handpicked me from the beginning, and my life has been in His hand. He's been orchestrating the doors that I go through and where I stay, and I'm just available. Um, so there is no, I didn't pursue anything that I've been doing as a passion or an interest. It grows on me. The Lord opened the door and He said, "Go for it," and I have been going with a passion ever since. But it really is a life calling. I do consider myself to be a missionary in my own country. So it is that um, innate desire to serve God and His people that fires me up day and night.
Hmm. Okay. So could you share a little bit about your own journey of how you reached here? So I know it's a call, but I know that there's a history. as well has influenced some of
Yeah,
your own thoughts and approaches.
yeah, yes. And God has, I have been handpicked from about 9, 10, when I actually heard the gospel for the first time. I was in grade 3 at primary school. And when I heard it was around Easter time, and in our primary schools, the whole Easter story enacted, told, and I mashed up the class. I started bawling, I wept, I shout, and I called the people wicked for doing what they did to Jesus because he did nothing. He wasn't deserving of that. The whole class was mashed up in grade 3. And I reckon by then that the Lord was ministering to me. Um, at around age 11, thereabout, I had the opportunity to accept the Lord Jesus Christ as my Savior. It was at a huge tent meeting put on by the Blair brothers in Hanover. And the tent was so big for a little kid like me that when they invited me to come to the altar, I was at the back post of the tent. And I just couldn't make it. It was intimidating. I know the Lord wanted me to go to the altar. I just couldn't make it. And I didn't go. But the Lord didn't let go of me. A year about later, 12 plus, I'm now in high school, I'm now in boarding school, and we are in the lecture theatre at worship, at our Sunday morning worship at the Jose Marti High School. And the call came again. This time I wasn't at the back of the auditorium, I was in the middle. It was still intimidating for me to walk down to the front, but I remembered my last mess when I messed up when I should have responded to that call, and I muscled up and I said yes to Jesus and I walked to the front. I've not looked back since. God has revealed some unique things to me that made me know I am handpicked and I'm special. Um, it was just perhaps 2 years into my walk with the Lord as a child, teenager, I discover where the Lord said, any male that opens the womb is blessed unto him. Oops, I hear that's me. And I started to see a personal reach out from the Lord to me, to open my eyes and my ears to being responsive to the fact that I was called for purpose. I was fired up for purpose. And it was while in high school growing, and thank heavens for Jose Marti, the boarding school then, that we had a very active inter-school Christian fellowship. And all the Christian kids would gather upstairs for Bible study in the evenings and praise and worship on Saturday nights. And we keep church on Sunday mornings, and we all grew in the Lord, teaching Bible study, preaching, practicing, and praying, and the whole 9 yards. So I grew, on that CXC time. I struggled because I had a eye problem. I just, my eyes were strained, and I was blessed with one of the worst looking pair of eyeglasses you could find. It caused me to hate eyeglasses to this very day. I was the first Urkel you could imagine. I mean, my eyeglasses never fit. The thing around my ears stopped halfway. It was terrible. I hate pair of glasses. My wife still believe I need to wear it. Yes, there is one in my room that I have worn only 3 times after how many thousands of dollars of getting it for me. But the Lord delivered me from all of that. When at CXC, I said, God, I am not feeling, I'm not going to do well. But if you help me through this, I will serve you for the rest of my life. Well, he did. And, I just figure that I had a life ahead of me to go live and all that kind of stuff. But I didn't feel that he was going to have anything particular for me to do. But he did. It was soon after that I opted out of going to college so that my siblings, because my father had died when I was 6 years old.
Mm.
So I then had four siblings, and I figure, I I better pave the way for them to at least complete their high school education. So I delayed going to college and decided that I would go to work. And God just had this unique setup for me that there was a call, almost a distress call, because there was need for a superintendent, a man or a woman, whoever was crazy enough to answer the call to be in charge of a boys' home. And my mentor in high school, who's now a pastor, he reckoned that I was desperate and I needed to find other employment. And the late Pastor Cedric Lou from the Open Bible Church, he had established the Sunbeam Boys Home. And I think he was desperate. As a pastor, he was desperate because no one in their right mind wanted to go into caring for boys that were as challenged as those were. Well, my mentor figured that I was the man. Sent me over there. Pastor Lou interviewed me, and he too agreed that I must, I am the man.
Mhm.
Well, I don't know if he was convinced because he took me by night. So I went to Sunbeam by night to be responsible for 20 boys. Some of them were older than I was, and my journey in response to God to honor His word, to honor my word that I would serve God for the rest of my life began. And being obedient to that call to serve the Lord at Sunbeam while my peers were globetrotting
Mm.
changed my life. Changed my life. Has set me on a trajectory that I'm on right now.
What would you say you learned from that first work experience?
Well, it was a huge lesson that has kept me to this very day. When I got there, it was nighttime. The boys were asleep. And I was just a boy myself. I was 18 years old. And I was going to be heading up a boys' home with 20 boys, some older than I was. And I couldn't sleep that night because I figure that I need to wake up in the morning to steer them down, and I needed to be at my best self. And I thought, how could I believed in first impression. How could I
Mm.
really impress these young men that they do what I say? So I had a military jacket in my little bit of wardrobe there. And I figured that, yeah, I could put this military jacket on, and that would show them that I'm a man of authority here and I'm here to run this place. Well, when I got out and I saw the boys for the first time, the Lord burned in my spirit that it wasn't going to be through my authority,
Mm.
that they were going to be groomed and nurtured and brought up to be the men that God wants them to be. But it was going to be through relational engagement, through modeling before the boys, and through listening to them and building that. At that time, it would have been a big brother relationship with them that would work, and it did. I didn't have to draw rank. I just needed to be a good role model for my little brothers. To this very day, I'm still their big brother. I'm the chairman of the Sunbeam Boys Home. We now have up to 100 boys there. So we serve and we learn as the Lord is teaching us. And I have, with my father passing when I was pretty young, I have learned to trust that my father, the Lord. So
Mm.
we've got that close father-son relationship going, which um, rolls over into my relationship with people.
Mm. Okay. So what was your next step in the same vein in terms of working with men, boys or men after this
Yes, yes.
experience at Sunbeam?
Yeah, well, the great thing about what God had burned in my spirit was that I was called to be totally different. I was called to not be like anybody else, but to be the person He wanted me to be.
Mhm.
And the first big plan that God burned in my spirit that I had to work with was a plan to build the current site where the boys' home is. And He would show me how we would build it with the boys. And each day after school, the boys would leave school at 2:30, and I grabbed them, and we would walk a mile down and a half down the road, and we will work and we'll build the current home. And
As
as
in
we were
construct.
building construct, it meant from we chopped the 4 3/4 acres of land with machetes. We cleared it with machetes to the point where our arms and our fingers were just like useless after we were done
Mm.
for about an hour to tease down. But the worst part of all of that exercise was that when we cleared the 4 3/4 acres of land with cutlasses, a tractor came to clear the weeds after we did all that work. So I guess character was being formed. I didn't complain. So we moved on and we built from clearing the land. We continued to pour in concrete, lifting blocks, doing whatever it took to build the campus that we now have at Sunbeam. But while doing that, the boys weren't accepted in the community. And this community in particular was a Spring Village community. There was so much stigma around boys, street boys. They thought that they were violent. They thought that they were prisoners. They thought all sorts of negative things about them. And so it was a struggle. So as they would go to the public school in the community, there were that stigma that they had to manage. And the founder of the home, the late Reverend Cedric Luke, came up with this brilliant idea that he's going to start a vocational training facility at the home and invite the kids from the community to come to the home there to learn with the boys these technical vocational skills. And yeah, that was a great idea. We had the space and we would do it. And as was the case there, I was head cook and bottle washer. So he figured that I needed to go learn to be a teacher to come back and teach them. So I was grabbed, literally grabbed and brought to Cornerstone School in Kingston to be trained over 3 years to be teacher, to
Mhm.
head up this vocational training facility at the home. I was young, I was energetic, I was setting out to change the world. There was nothing too hard. I went for it. And in my third year, and I was in Bible college at the same time, actually. So I was at Bible college at Cornerstone, and there, there was a call from the prison authorities because one John Prescott had big plans to transform the prisons of Jamaica, and he did his research and found that Cornerstone was busy doing some stuff in industry and working with some young men, and he figured that wow, that's a technical school that was let's invite them into the prison, and there he invited us and the lot fell on me. So here I am marching down into South Camp Rehab Center to go build a school for inmates.
This was while you
And
were at Sunbeam?
while I'm at Sunbeam. So I am at
Wow.
Sunbeam. I am now about to graduate from Cornerstone to be in charge of the VOTEC at Sunbeam. And then here is this opportunity to go into the prisons while I'm at Sunbeam. And we are doing it, we're setting up, we're starting, we're conceptualizing. we're doing all of that while at Sunbeam. And the Lord released me from Sunbeam because for
Mm,
one reason or another, the vision to build the Votech at Sunbeam just wasn't gelling. It wasn't
mm,
coming together. Now I can look back in hindsight that it was the Lord's doing. he set it all up and opened the door for somebody who was crazy enough to believe him and to step into South Camp Rehabilitation Center, formerly known as also known as a gun court,
mm,
and stepped in without fear, stepped in without experience, stepped in without a blueprint. There was nothing we had called strategies for rehabilitation that we were going to implement. We went in because the Lord opened the door. And as He opens the door, we met some 40, 45 eagerly anticipating young men and who were anxious to get involved. Little did we know that most of them were on death row, and this was an opportunity for them to do something constructive while they were waiting out their sentences, all that stuff. But God opened that door. We walked through that door, and that set my life on another trajectory that was orchestrated by God. Because what God was revealing to me, which I couldn't see then until years later, was in the heart of God was the boys at Sunbeam.
mm,
God wanted to show me that if I didn't get Sunbeam right, to nurture these boys, to grow them up in the way that they ought to go, their next stop was prison. So the Lord was giving me a live lesson, and He was opening these doors for me to show me, give me a first-hand view and taste of what would happen if this calling upon my life wasn't taken seriously, wasn't understood, because people would be hurting for that. So I saw that happening because it wasn't orchestrated by me. I didn't have to submit an application. To this very day, I have not supplied an application to any job, anything that I currently are doing. It has been strategic. The Lord closed one door, He opens another, I walk through it, and then it connects.
wow. I mean, first of all, like building blocks. I mean, I
That's it.
love to hear journeys because it's so interesting how, one aspect of your life then leads into another. And really, in hindsight, you're able to see, this is a reason why this happened, you know?
That's right.
So now that you were
Mhm.
in Cornerstone Ministries, I mean, y-
Yes.
you did a lot there. What were some of the
Yeah.
initiatives that were implemented by Cornerstone Ministries? I mean, you spoke about those persons who are on death row, and what's interesting for me and important for me, and I guess why I wanted to speak with you about Cornerstone Ministries is because some of the men I
Mhm.
interviewed spoke about Cornerstone Ministries and the
Yes.
importance and what Cornerstone Ministries did in their life, and so I was
Yes.
like, there was obviously this ministry and under Prescott as well, that
Yes.
really did facilitate change. So what was the secret?
Well, the secret was what, again, another move of God. It was a master stroke of God. He handpicked some crazy people to follow him into the prison system. There was no precedence, there was no blueprint. We just were ready to go to do what God said. Douglas Kessner, a missionary to Jamaica, he and his wife Lana. Doug was working in the aerospace industry. Lana, a nurse, and they packed up their scandal bag and they head to Jamaica, and they were working in Cassava Peace, building a church and clinic at the church on the rock. They went up to um, Papine, built the market up there. And then the Lord said to Doug, start the school. That's the school that I was a student at. And while there, the call from Mr. Prescott, Colonel Prescott came. When God opened that door, as I said, we had no blueprints. We went down there with a blank sheet, but he started revealing things like the prison had no schools. They didn't have a room for school. It didn't have amenities to support rehabilitation. Rehabilitation wasn't even a theory that was being practiced there. The concept was vague. So we got there and we recognized that, well, we would need a space to call school. And we had to set out to build the building. We begged. Food for the Poor came to our rescue. We put up buildings, and our partners from all over the world supported, and we bought equipment and we equipped the place and get a functional school. We made a call out in the community for person in the prison community for persons who are interested in coming to the school. The numbers came, and that's what I said. It was surprising to know that most of the men who came were men were on death row, or men whose lives were commuted to life imprisonment after the Pratt and Morgan case and decision by the Privy Council. In fact, Pratt was my assistant teacher in gun court in South Camp, where it was following that victory. So he was one of the pioneers with me. Morgan was in there too, but Morgan wasn't in the school. But what started to happen, while I was big brother at Sunbeam, I was no little brother in the prisons. So I am their teacher. And these guys, they're all older than me, all whatever, but I'm their teacher. I'm doing things together. We are learning. Our cornerstone school, I had them for 8 hours per day in school. And we worked it through. We built a relationship. We built a brotherly relationship. They understood me. I understood them. Those days, we all were dressed alike. I mean, they were in civilian clothing. I in my civilian clothes. Only persons were uniformed there would have been the warders. And there were times when a student inmate would accompany me to as far as he could go. There are other inmates who would be orderlies who could have gone further beyond that point. And there were times when officers were on duty and they don't know who I was. And I go up to the gate to be let out to go about my business, to go home. And say, so what you want? Where you going? It would be an inmate who would say, oh, you're a teacher, And so we built that rapport. We built a program where the men were empowered, but the program, which was unique in the prison, was a Christ-centered program. So it was a VOTEC program, but it was integrated around the Bible, Christian principles that were practical application of conflict resolution, taming the tongue, the basic needs of the wife, all the kinds of stuff we're teaching these men, and then have them demonstrate it through their life in the prison community. We obviously made an impact in the prison system at South Camp. In fact, we outgrew South Camp facility and we were offered GP, General Penitentiary. This is where the rubber touchy road, where the real tough things started happening.
Before you go there, though, when we talk about building rapport, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
As a teacher, can you teach me
Yes.
what it means to build rapport in these situations with these boys, with
Yes.
these men?
Yeah. Well, the rapport that I found to be easiest to build was modeling, was living what I was saying, was showing and demonstrating what I meant. So it was more relational than instructional. It wasn't top down, it was making it conversational. It was showing them the respect that others didn't have for them, and connecting at a level where we were able to reason. And for example, in engaging my brothers, and I would call them brothers in the prison because they're one example, when I said men, and they are upset with me for calling them men. And I said, why? We're males. That's what it is. We're men. I said, no. In the prison, you don't use that term around here because it has this negative connotation. And I said, okay, brothers. But brothers, remember, I'm not here to keep you imprisoned. I'm here to prepare you for your release into society. So I'm here to teach you those skills that you need to master to be your best when you are released. So we had those kind of interactions, and they believed me. They listened to me, and I was no authority in their life, but I was their brother. I was relating, and I identified with them, and we were able to build amazing things, starting first and foremost with the relationship, trusting relationship, through technical knowledge, whether it was woodwork I was teaching them, our technical drawing I was teaching them, our communication, our Bible class I was teaching them. Whatever it was relational. It wasn't abstract. It was something that they could identify with, and it was to help to transform them to citizens of this great Jamaica land we love. And because I believed that my mission to them was to help them to get out better men. Mm-hmm. And we talked about that a lot. And in fact, they were able to see us actually helping them to get out. And I can tell you that later too, but we did help to get out, and we did help to get these men actively engaged in impacting the lives of others positively.
Okay. So can you take us through the experience at GP now?
GP. Well,
yeah,
that was
GP.
A different world. That was a different world. So at South Camp, we had one classroom. At GP, we were given an entire prison block. 100 inmates we were given. And that block, we had certain privileges. Doug, a Caucasian American, he loved to consider himself a Jamaican, and him chatting his patois here and him chatting his patois there. And here it is, we have been given authority to go into the prisons wherever we want to go, because one of the inmates that has been signed up and classed out to go into our prison, into our program in the prison, is having a challenge there or something. And we, again, luckily for us, we didn't have to start from scratch in GP, but it was, might as well call it a scratch, because we found a ruin of a building that we thought was big enough to be restored. And again, with Food for the Poor's help, we restored that building and it became the school block. So those 100 men we had at different times, but they were always late for school. Always. School is to start at 9 o'clock and they're not there until 10:30, and they're coming from across there. Mm-hmm. Why? And we figured out that the entire block of men had only one running water hose, and that water hose was to provide the shower for each man to bathe, and they were waiting their turn, and it was painful waiting, and time was wasting. But guess what? In prison, that's what you got. Mm-hmm. In prison, you're in no hurry to get anywhere, because I tell you, the longer you are out, the better it is for you, because going back in that cell is not pretty. So you're not in any hurry to get anything done. You're wasting as much of your time on the outside as you can. It was not good for schooling and for training though. And we at Cornerstone, we got together and we thought this through, and we saw how could we solve this problem. We came up with a solution. God has always given us this idea, and we built a block of showers for them to go into and have their bath so that they can get to school on time. Because you see, our job was not to keep them in prison. It was to prepare them and teach them values and attitudes and ethics that would be helpful for them upon their return to the society. We believed in rehabilitation. So it didn't matter what sentence they were running. It didn't matter how many years they had left in the prison. Our mandate was to train them for their return to society. And that's what we were focused on. And got them their books, got them their gears, and they were ready and actively attending school. And we knew based on feedback from industry, because a part of the program was getting them, those who were released, jobs in industry. And the feedback from industry was, hey, listen, they need again, and asked for more space in the prison. And he gave us, I think it was 5 to 7 acres of the prison at Tower Street, a place called the Brickyard that most Jamaicans don't know exist. It is as accessible under a tunnel under Tower Street, and you get through that tunnel and you're in this world called the Brickyard. And we were able to transform the Brickyard into an industrial enterprise, teaching the men life, job skills, relational skills every morning. Up to 100 inmates would have been brought under the tunnel and given to me. And the wardens that would say, well, they're yours to do whatever you want. I could sing to them, I could preach to them, I could teach them, or we could do stuff. And stuff we did. We made furniture, we built concrete blocks, we grow chicken meat, we produce eggs, vegetables, honey, escallion furniture. We did all of that there whilst preparing the men for their reentry, to include providing them with monies for their account to take back home with them.
No, man. I mean, so what I'm hearing is what I was told, in my research, in different aspects, I mean,
Yes.
what I like about the approach is, I think sometimes we have more of a welfare approach. So we just give persons who are incarcerated things, but this was a developmental approach,
Yeah.
where you are entooling, you are equipping,
Yes.
you are challenging mindsets, encouraging confidence, giving practical,
Hmm.
providing for practical needs. So even the money in the account, persons may listen to that and think,
Yes.
why would you give money in the account right now, from now, while they're incarcerated? But that really is, one of the ways to prepare persons
Yes.
to re-enter society and have something to use when they return, because the money that they may
Absolutely.
get when they're returning is not enough
Yes.
to last a day. And when you go into the wider society and you go
That's
back to
true.
your families, they're also expecting that you'd be able to provide some support as well. So I really love this
Yeah.
developmental
Yes.
approach and holistic, and that you are able to also use the Bible
Mhm.
um, in the mix to teach practical
Yes.
life skills, that would guide the rest of their
Yes.
lives. So I know you also had reintegration
Absolutely.
support and support for persons who had left the
Yes.
correctional facility. What was that program like?
Hmm.
Oh, before that.
Well, I tell you. Mhm.
No, no, answer that question. My apologies. Answer that question and then I'll ask you the other question.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as you would have picked up, our program was holistic. It was individually centered. What I meant that although we had groups of men that were interested in the needs of each person, so it wasn't a wholesale club. It was the brothers, it was looking at their needs. And so, yes, the monies that they would leave with was important, but where were they leaving to? If we weren't going to help them to move on in the best possible way to make the best out of life, to make their best contribution, we probably again will be setting them up to fail. So we recognized that a halfway house as a companion to the program was necessary, and that we went out again with Doug's leadership, and we got at Roy Rattray and others, the board of Cornerstone, Reverend Al Miller, Major Neil Lewis. These are transformational men. These are not, these are men, Francis Hill, Ian Levy. These are the men who made up the board of Cornerstone. So when we set out to do things, it wasn't fia, it wasn't venke. It was real stuff that we're gonna do to make real change. The halfway house, we call it the restoration house, was established, and men could transition to restoration because, and here it was also strategic. You couldn't send a man who was in GP back to Westmoreland or to Manchester if he didn't finish his course as a student in prison. So that was another reason for the restoration house. He was released from prison, but he could stay in the restoration house, and we had a companion school outside of prison. So they could continue their education at Crossroads when they left South Camp Road or they left South Street. So there was this symbiotic connection aimed at ensuring that the brothers were really given the push start, the second leash in life as they needed, and they had a home. Soon the numbers started growing. Soon other opportunities came for us to reach out to other inmates not coming from the Jamaican jails, but were deportees coming over, and we were able to house them. Soon we couldn't find enough jobs in industry for them. So we recognized that we better come up, design a program, and the Overcomers program was designed and implemented. And the Overcomers program was a violence prevention program where ex-inmates were going back into the schools across the length and breadth of Jamaica, sharing about their lifestyles, not to get into crime with kids. And, it was just an amazing thing to see men who had come to Jesus Christ, accepted Jesus as Lord and Savior. They had gone the 360. They had a testimony and they met Jesus Christ, and they were now bold as lion and were prepared to go back into the schools and in the inner city communities, because it was just into schools. They were going into schools, they were going into communities, and they were going into churches, and they would speak at any meeting that gives them an audience about their life that they're coming from, to the life that they now have, and also how to divert from a life of crime. So the connectivity of all the parts were just so incredible, and they came together to make one program of inmate rehabilitation and their reintegration seamless.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, when I'm listening to you, I'm just hearing the research and how what you did that was God revealed is actually backed up by
Yes,
research, and what the research has
yes,
found internationally that works, because even having the men be ambassadors in a sense for peace and for
yes,
walking
yes.
lives on the straight and narrow, these are all backed by research, and so you just hear the kind of connection between God revealing truths that actually work. And just the
Yes.
holistic
Yep.
approach, the sequential approach that was taken, and you really see the importance of you build a relationship during the correctional facility. You have this halfway house to continue the relationship, but also continue the training, and the provision of opportunities. And then they're able now also to go and move on to the next step of evangelizing, of spreading this message of peace, of change,
Yes.
and violence prevention. I mean, yeah,
Hmm.
just pretty amazing, So, before we kind of move on,
Yeah.
what I wanted
It
to ask.
Dr.
Oh,
Joe, Dr. Joe,
yes.
yeah, what is amazing now looking back is the hand of God. Because as you're pointing to your research findings, remember, we had no blueprint when we go in there. We were just being led by the Spirit, I believe, as we were moving from one level, one tier to the next. And we were just helping people. We at Cornerstone believed in what we were practicing, what we believe. So much so that my wife was invited and served in the prison with me and staff and called GP. My wife was the administrator inside the prison, not from our office in Crossroad. She was in the prison with me every day. She was engaging with inmates that I described. She was preparing all the necessary stuff that was needed to make the projects work. She was all the way because we believed in it. We believed in the fact that rehabilitation was real. We saw it in the lives of these men, and in the community that we were practicing. Um, you know, they were real. And we went further. We also had some of these men join our staff at Cornerstone. We would get, we're going on weekend retreats, staff retreats in Mandeville, Manchester. We seek passes from the for an entire weekend retreat. So our boss would pull up at the prison gate and they would jump in, come out of the prison gate, get on the bus, and our bus or our car back into their cell Sunday evening. We practice this day in, day out because we believed in salvation, the transformational effect of God in people's lives, and know that these guys weren't takers. Men of God they had become were givers. They were passionate about their life in Christ. They were serving, and they served to the highest level in Cornerstone. Um, one is currently the husband of the manager of Cornerstone, and it just went all over the place. There are pastors all across the country, currently pastoring churches and leading ministries, leading families. It's what God has done. It is what God has done, and we can testify to the power of Jesus Christ.
Hmm. So, if you are supposed to take me through, just looking back at the men, looking back at the experience, a journey of one of the men who would have come to you, what were they like? If you could describe what they were like, what Cornerstone did, and
Ooh,
how you believe it changed them. Take me through that. So you could say, let's say there's a gentleman named Paul. Who
yeah,
was Paul, and who did he become?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, I can tell you about many of them, but there is this one, and he was not particularly unique because there were many of them like that. But you know, when we met him, he couldn't read or write. He was illiterate, so he learned to read the Bible, and he grew from learning to read the Bible to become an assistant teacher in the prison system, then a teacher in the system. Um, he's out now, and I think Mr. Kessner bumped into him in Kingston a couple months ago, and he sent greetings to me. You know, he's leading productive, prosperous life. There are others who too couldn't read. They learned their to read with the Bible, and also through the various classes. Because what was evident from early was that God had handpicked the people who He wanted in the program. So as I was mentoring, Doug Kessner was mentoring, and other staff members of Cornerstone, because we brought in an army of people too. So it wasn't a one-man shop. It was an army of people. Stephen, the math teacher. I mean, I tell you this story, and the world probably would find it impossible. Mr. Stephen, our math teacher, he drove a Morris Aston motor car. It must have been the oldest car in Jamaica at the time. And he was a big guy. So when he sat in the car, one side go up in the air and the other side go down. And so we could drive our vehicle into the prison. And there he goes. He drove into the prison, the car broke down. And one student, we weren't teaching auto mechanic. He was in the woodwork program. And his math teacher car broke down. And you know what? He went to his cell and found a part in his cell and fixed the car. The man drove out of the prison with his car fixed, parts supplied, and gone. It's a true story of the genius of these men, and the fact that a second chance, a second opportunity, which for most was their first real opportunity, had
Can you
set
share a
them on
little
a
bit
path
about that?
that they were going to be. Yes.
Sorry about that. Could you share a little
The
bit
auto
more about
mechanic.
that? No. The second opportunity actually being their first opportunity.
This, yeah. You see, when I realized that the Lord had sent me to the prison because of my mission, my longer term mission to raise up boys to become men. So I didn't know that my mission, no, listen, after how many years, I am now going to be the chairman of Sunbeam. I'm now the chairman of the Boys Home that I so nervously, so whatever. But I didn't know that God had this plan to pull all of these things together. So this plan to raise boys up, it's almost like to create the word is slipping me now, but it's almost to create an incubator to solve Jamaica's problem. To solve the Jamaica's problem. Because my boys at Sunbeam were there largely because their fathers and the parents had failed them. So a big part of my call was to break that cycle. I couldn't appreciate the importance of breaking the cycle until I go into the prison and I saw boys in the prison, which were boys in men's husk. These were big boys, so-called men that were thinking like boys. They were thinking like children, and that is what led them to that. So talking about their first real opportunity, prison, those rehab programs was their first real opportunity where life would make sense for them. Some of them, whilst at home as children, grew up to be adults, lived in rebellion. They didn't listen. They didn't learn values and attitudes. They didn't. Now, with a relational and a very firm program, not one that is focused on authority, but one that is focused on building relationships, man with God and man with his fellow men, things were coming together. People were seeing reason for living, purpose. They were understanding why they were here. They were understanding why would my wife and I leave wherever we are and go down into GP to work with them. Why Doug, a white man, would be in here pouring his life into them. They were seeing the softer side. They were seeing humanity. They were seeing God in people. And as it were, God had sent people down there to help to rescue them, to get them back on a firm path. So yes, many was their first real opportunity in life. Most grabbed it. Most grabbed it. Today, they are better men. Today, they are contributing to society in positive ways.
So those persons who I'm assuming, and you can let me know, were there some persons who weren't as successful in the program? And
Mhm.
if so, why do you think that was? What led to that?
Yeah, yeah. There were persons who were struggling with their own issues, their background, they dropped out of class. They refused to come back to class. The burdens on their shoulder, their dysfunction, their inability to shake off the guy on his shoulder, all of those things led to few, because that was also historic. Very few, because those who attended the program, it was therapy. It was a therapeutic thing. You don't want to not be in an environment where their life controlling problems, yeah, and so on. I believe it had a lot to do with the fact that Colonel Prescott, was he a colonel? I'm saying Colonel Prescott,
I think so.
had a vision for rehabilitation, which was just a process. So weren't weren't put together yet. So the psychological support and those other parts that needed to help inmates to process and to get a hold of the issues, the root issues, those onion peels that needed to be brought back from their early, those weren't a part of it. So there were persons who weren't able to make the transition, to make the journey, because those supports weren't there. So our 1 hour of Bible class wouldn't have been sufficient to help those persons with those particular unique personal, and there were some interpersonal stuff too. And you know, you talk with the brothers, I talk with them, and you would hear their stories of being controlled. And that's why it brought home to me that if I didn't get the boys home right, more boys would end up in gangs being led by others who would influence them to do all kinds of things that is after they did it, they realized that it was wrong.
Mm.
It is after, because, and you see all of that playing out, and you realize that the absence of empowerment, the absence of values and attitudes and mentors and people to talk with like father, the absence of the father in that male's life, to for him to run something, bounce off something off his father, or run to. I remember when I was in high school and was being bullied. My father died when I was 6, but up to 6 years old, I have the most amazing relationship with my father. I was now about 14, going on to 15, and I was being bullied, and I just couldn't take that licking anymore. And one day I just burst out. If my father was alive, you couldn't do that to me. What?
Mm.
He was dead 9 years. But that came out. I felt I could have been protected. My father would have protected me. Well, I was from a stable home, but that came out without thinking. The need for
Mhm.
safety, security, the need to trust somebody, the need to be protected by somebody. So, well, if you don't have that protection and the gang down the road promises that, where do you think you're gonna go? Where do
Mhm.
you think you're gonna go? So the dysfunctional community and society, which most of us are from, and that's why, I'm a transformational practitioner. I'm a community development practitioner working to bring safe spaces in the community where people can relate, people can breathe, where people can sit, people can talk. The absence of those, I could align to what we found in the prison system. Just as Barbara Goodan would say, chaka chaka. It was just such a mess that it also fed into the mind the kinds of things that you would think and act out later on. So many fell through the crack. Many. And I saw
Mm,
it even in the boys at the boys' home. When we pick them up off the street boys, we pick them up off the street, we give them a bath, we give them clothes, we give them a bed, and they are welcome and are hugged. And it's bedtime. That boy would go and sleep on the concrete rather
mm,
on the bed. He was used to the concrete. And it was going to take a while to get him accustomed to the mattress that he used to go on, which is his bed. So all of these
mm.
life lessons, um, I'm grateful. I really am grateful. And it has helped to fire me up to make me the servant leader I am today.
Hmm. Wow. I mean, this is so much, and I don't feel like I've even gone through the rest of your life, and the rest of the work that you have done, and so I think that I need to have a part two, right? Where, we speak about the other section, the post cornerstone ministry life. But
Sure.
as I said initially, one of the things that's so important on this podcast is to help people to know how they can participate, how they can
Yes.
support, because sometimes we see the issue of violence in our nation and we feel so
Yes.
powerless, and we don't know what to do. So as we close, Mr. Finnikin, I just want to ask you to share as many, action, tasks, strategies
Yes.
as you can, that you believe normal persons can engage in. So maybe I won't be a community development worker or a transformational
Yeah.
leader, but what are some of the things I can do to contribute to violence reduction, to supporting people leaving this life of crime, to reintegration?
The first for me, and I've seen evidence of it working in these inmates, I mean ex-inmates' lives, is surrendering one's life to Jesus Christ. It has made such a world of difference, certainly in my life and the lives of the prisoners. These were men who, some were murderers, some were all sorts of stuff, but they came into that saving relationship with Jesus Christ. It opened their eyes. It opened their eyes. And when one's eyes, not only his physical, but spiritual eyes are open, he sees life differently. He sees people. He sees God's people. He now wants to enter into wholesome relationship with God's people. He doesn't want to hurt people. He doesn't want to lie to people. He doesn't want to cheat people. He wants the best for his neighbor. So he wants to live out his best life by helping others to live out their best. He doesn't want to take another person's life, right? He really wants to ensure that he is participating in helping others to live and more so to experience abundant life in Jesus Christ. Secondly, I would also want to say every Jamaican, and especially those of us within and with other parts of the world where there's high level of dysfunction at the community level, get involved in community. Be a part of your citizens association. It is not okay to get out in the morning, go about your business, and come home at night and expect that somebody is going to be protecting your space and developing your space for you to enjoy. It's not right. Give an hour per month, an hour per quarter into your community association. Give back to your community. Get involved in, however, fix the pothole, um, cut the park, whatever it is, those things that see you actively engage in communal life, building and nurturing community spirit. What I found to be found is that when you've learned to be a good neighbor, it's your best security system. It's your best security system because I can tell you, you got money, you've got armed guards, you've got everybody on speed dial to run to your rescue in the event that you need backup. I tell you, if your neighbor isn't that first guy who run comes to you, you you know wouldn't be here to tell. But the thing is, so that's the second practical thing: be active, look at opportunities to be engaged. All of us won't be professional community developers, but all of us can be good neighbors. Be a good neighbor. Practice neighborliness. The third I would say is look out for somebody to mentor. Find a mentee. Find a mentee. And mentoring and participating in mentorship doesn't have to be formal. You can be a good advisor to your kids' friends. They look up to you because of how the relationship between you and your children and others in the community, they call upon you. My son's friends ask me to write references for them. My children's friends come on and ask me about for advice and so on. Be quick to help children and youth. And as I say, it doesn't have to be formal. If your time doesn't allow for you to be engaged in formal mentoring, do so informally. Look out for the kid, whether it's on the beach or in the market or on the street where you, hey, just reach out with a smile. As challenging as our society is in Jamaica, I've just had my first disrespect from one child, from one youth in all of my nearly 100 years old. One person, young person, that just disrespected me in all of my life. And she is a 14-year-old female who I literally grew up and guided, and now she is in high school and all. And she said something to my face publicly that was disgraceful. But I wasn't embarrassed by it. I recognized she was calling out for help, And the other kids saw me and they were laughing and laughing and laughing at my face. And I said, no, kid, this is not something to laugh about. Actually, very serious. But I will help her. And set out to help her. They didn't believe. They said it was a waste of time. They said that she's so far gone that it is a waste of time. That's how she behaves these days. But I'm saying, okay, well, but then God used that to show me that she needed help. So many times we allow ourselves to be thin-skinned, that we say, oh, these kids, these young people, I can't deal with them these days. They have no. Well, they're struggling like we are struggling with other issues, or like we struggled with similar issues when we were growing up. Yeah, it's different times we're living in, but it's not the time to give up on a child or to give up on a young adult. There are issues that we all have, but stick with them for the long haul. It don't make it so personal. They say things that hurt, and sometimes go on licking our wounds. Probably there'll be some respite there, but it's not to give up and say I am done with that person. It is to recognize that we are in community, and we just need to find ways to work with each other. The last thing I would say is be the best citizen you can be. The best citizen you can be. So I started out by inviting persons to consider surrendering their lives to the Lord, because He gives the total picture perspective. He provides that. And then just look at how you can be a citizen of your own country. You are not a taker, you are a giver. It's not about what Jamaica as a country or the government can do for you. It's what can you do for country. You look at that perspective and you'll find a different outlook on life. And yes, government have responsibilities and they must be held accountable to do what they're supposed to do, that they've been elected to do. And we're not easing up on that because they need to do a lot more, much more. But I tell you, there is a role for you and I as a citizen on this rock, Jamaica land we love, to give more to nation building, contribute more to nation building. Because, hey, we do have a Vision 2030 that we all need to pitch into work to realize over the next 7 years. Well, we need to add or minus a couple years, COVID, whatever. But hey, we've got a beautiful country. We're hurting because of a few people, few of our brothers and sisters. But I think God is hearing our prayers. There are more of us, ordinary people, rising up and are being a part of the change. And I see light at the end of the tunnel. I see our crime stats moving down. I mean, only 12%, it seems slow. I mean, I was expecting like 30, 40% this year. But then I'm overly optimistic. You know, we've got broken communities, broken families. It's gonna take time for wounds to heal and for us to start being more practice, more wholesome lifestyles. But to God be the glory, and just believe in our people. Help our people to be their best selves. I believe that's a tonic, and I believe that's therapeutic, and I believe it will make Jamaica even a better place.
Thank you so much, Mr. Finnikin. So much to learn, encouraged, challenged, and I want to thank you and congratulate you for all the work that you have done. I know God has done
Thank
it
you.
through you, but you could have said
Yes.
no and, and moved on with your life. So,
Yes.
thank you for saying
Absolutely.
yes and being a yes man in this case. Jamaicans have another
Yes.
connotation for yes man, but, being a yes man to
No.
God, and,
Yeah.
availing yourself to serve. Listeners, viewers, I know that this must have been a good conversation for you, very insightful. There is hope. Sometimes again we look at the situation within our nation, and we look at our correctional facilities and we think nothing can be done. But here we have another example that something can be done and you can be a part of it.
Absolutely.
And though, Mr. Finnegan may have been one of the leaders for these initiatives, there were other people that came on board just to be a math teacher, just to share some of the expertise that they have and that they may have
Yeah.
been using in other spheres, and maybe in their main employment, for example. And so using and sharing our expertise is one of the ways in which we can contribute to reducing violence. Because, as Mr. Finnegan said, sometimes the second chance is actually the first chance that persons get to
Yes.
learn and to live a lifestyle that is at the standard that we are hoping that all persons will live at. So, thank you again, Mr. Finnegan. Thanks
My
for
pleasure.
coming. Thanks for sharing. Listeners and viewers, thank you for watching. And remember to subscribe to Safer Tomorrow podcast on YouTube and Safer Tomorrow pod on Instagram and Facebook. We look forward to hearing from you. Remember, this is a conversation, this is a community, I'm finding persons to share so that we can get ideas, so that we can dialogue and figure out how are we really going to transform this nation together. Have a good day. Bye.